Hey guys, in this video I'm going to share a couple of tips with you that will instantly help you take much better portrait pictures. I'm going to try and keep this as simple as possible and focus on just a few important settings that'll get you the best results and not focus on a bunch of other details. There's nothing I hate more in the world than when I'm watching like a 20-minute YouTube video to try and find like one little piece of information, and it drives me fucking crazy, so I'm gonna try and not do that. The very first thing you consider when shooting a portrait is to zoom on your camera. When shooting a portrait, you want to zoom in all the way. Basically, that flattens out the image. If you use a wide lens, zoomed out all the way, your subject will get a fish nose. You don't want that. So the first thing is you zoom in all the way on your camera and you step back until your subject is in frame. Next up, you want to position yourself so that the light in the environment is facing your subject. You don't ever want to shoot into the sun. What that does, it'll make your subject look completely black and the background completely blown out. You want to avoid this. Then it's time to look at the camera settings. The first thing you want to do is you want to set the camera to manual mode, and you do this on the little dial. You switch it to where it says M. It's the same for any camera. M means manual. I know this sounds scary because manual is for professional photographers only, but I'm going to dumb this down and make it really simple so anyone can follow along and understand it. Basically, by changing the camera to manual mode, you prevent the camera from ruining your image by allowing the camera to guess all your settings. It never really has a great outcome. Now, the first thing we want to adjust on the camera is the aperture, also known as the f-stop, and it's the little number with an F in front of it. What this determines is how much blur is behind your subject. And since we're shooting a portrait, we want the background to be blurry because that basically makes your subject pop from the background. So in order for that to happen, we want to lower the f-stop as much as possible. Basically, the lower the number, the more blur in the background. Alright, next up, we want to adjust the shutter speed. And basically, the lower the shutter speed, the blurrier your image will be. Because for as long as the shutter is open, you have to hold the camera completely still. Otherwise, your picture is going to be blurry. So a good rule of thumb here is to basically pick a number that's high enough that it allows you to hold the camera completely 100% still while you're taking the picture. And what is that number? Typically, it's very simple, 1/125 to 1/160. That's a good rule of thumb that'll allow you to hold the camera steady enough to always take a good picture. Most of the time that'll give you a non-blurry sharp image because there can't be much movement within 1/160th of a second. Now once we have the aperture and the shutter speed set, we want to set the ISO. And this is actually the least important thing when shooting a portrait. So this is the one thing we want to let the camera determine on its own. So we want to set that to auto, and you do that by going into the little ISO menu and just changing that to auto. And this way the camera will actually adjust the ISO based on all the other settings. So you're controlling the aesthetic of the image by the aperture and the shutter speed like we adjusted previously, and then you're letting the camera adjust the brightness of the image by setting the ISO to auto. This way, whether or not you're inside or outside or what environment you're shooting in, the camera will adjust the brightness of the image to the correct environment, but at the same time you're controlling the aesthetic of the image because you set the aperture and the shutter speed. And the last thing to consider when shooting a portrait is tell your subject not to pose. Try and act natural. Tell your subject to turn away from you and then turn to you and take the picture as soon as the subject faces you. That way he or she won't have a chance to pose, basically. Do you remember that episode of Friends when Chandler has to have his portrait taken with Monica, and every time the guy aims the camera at him he makes like a face? This is basically what happens to most people. So avoid this by getting your subjects not to pose, by tricking them. Have them turn away, face you, or use props. That's another really good way. You get the subject to focus on an object. It probably can be anything. And by focusing on an object, they're not going to be focusing on you taking that picture. And that way you're going to get a better portrait. I hope you learned something. If you did, please subscribe to this channel. We'll do more, and please leave a message in the description box below and tell me what you would like to learn next. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.